Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're here in Columbus, Georgia, the home of ISAC. And it's always a pleasure to visit with Dr. Mahan and the research and information that is done here. In this particular meeting, you're going to enjoy his report on his work, The Secret, a wonderful book, a book that's hard to lay down once you start, and The Sun Kings. Every American Indian, or I could even say Indians everywhere, will find it very interesting. Dr. Mahan, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for
again.
coming.
And we appreciate always being with you.
I'll see what I can do.
Known as the Muskogees, are better known as to the late writers as Creeks in Alabama, Georgia, and on the seaboard countries, where there were people there before they ever came to that country. These people were the Choyahas, or Yustafoeno, are better known today as Yuchis. And their original name was Choyahaoeno, which was the governing word as it is of today from their starting point. And their leader, as many nations. Spiritually, they inherited, instilled in them their lineage for generations to come. They had a tribal town, a big one, at Gastropha. That is a Yuchi word. And it was said by the old people that what they call Shawalaweno, or Shaweno, that they call themselves Sawanogi. The word Sawanogi is not a Yuchi word. Great tribe of them branched off in different branches. And from this Sawanogi became known to the public in the world as Shawnees. They also branched off in groups. There was a big tribe of them. And one branch called itself Ispokogi, another one Kispokogi, and another Istimaskogagi, and the last was Moscovi.
You have just heard Chief Samuel W. Brown, Jr. explain some of the things that I am going to discuss today, and I hope that with his introduction of them and my explanation that you will know a great deal more about several very important subjects relating to the American Indians than you know now. Now, as you listened to Chief Brown earlier, you realize how very much a part of all this he was, and of course had been, all of his life, because he was the hereditary chief of the Yuchi people. He was a little too modest to tell you that his forebears were not only hereditary chiefs of the Yuchis, but they were in fact emperors over a confederation that involved a great many peoples. And this, of course, is the group that he calls the Shawano. And Shawano in the Yuchi language is simply Sha, which in the structure of the Yuchi language it can make complete sense. It means two separate things. It means a falcon or an eagle, but it also means serpent. And so we take the combination of them, Shawano, to be the plumed serpent. Now, the Shawano are allied to the Yuchin people in a rather complicated way that I will attempt to explain. He mentioned the Zoya, or the Zoyaha. Zo is the Yuchi word for son. Ya means part of, or filled with, or associated with, or identical to sometimes. These are the Zoya, freely translated children of the sun. The ha is a nominative plural ending that the Yuchis put on names that apply to themselves. In other words, we are Zoya. Now, in my work in Pakistan, it had occurred to me long before that the one place I needed to go more than anywhere else was the Indus Valley, which seemed to me, the ancient Indus civilization there, for a variety of reasons, to have very strong connections with what I knew of the Yuchi cultural origin. And we were provided with guides and with hospitality all the way from Karachi on the south to the Himalayas on the north, and the Khyber Pass and all the cities in between, and a great many of the villages. And it became clear from that, incidentally, that not only are there relationships to the culture represented at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, the two great brick-constructed cities on the Indus that were abandoned from some catastrophe in about the year 1500 BC. But that certain later cultures seem to me to have even more relevance to some of our American cultures. But since I was involved with, at the time, with the Yuchis and Yuchi relationships, I pretty much limited to that. And to make a long story short, I convinced myself that the core to all of the cultures involved was something that had to do with secret knowledge that had to be learned through steps. And of course, this is part of the symbolism that is on the front of the book. The staircase to heaven, it's called sometimes, or other step, but it's the sky. And it's adapted from this part, at least, from Chief Brown's drawing that is also shown in the book. The relationship between the earth, represented by the spiral, and the air, which of course is the wind, which is very important, and the other symbols that are hereupon. These same things applied in Pakistan, in the Indus Valley. Was one thing that really impressed me more than anything else. There is in the collection of material that Chief Samuel Brown brought personally and turned over to the Columbus Museum for presentation, for preservation, a bandolier. Well, it's a bandolier, but it consists of what are called, they're tubular pipes that are large in the middle and about 3 inches long. There are 4 of them strung together on a piece of leather. There are a peculiar type of little brass beads that are put on each of the strands, and then there's a section of the leather again. Then there are more of the beads, and there are certain furs and all that appear to be original on this. Without the furs, hanging reconstructed in the museum at Mohenjo-daro is an exact duplicate of this bandolier. And the bandolier itself was something I had never seen pictured or had never seen an example of, but which Chief Brown assured me was one of their oldest and most important ceremonial items. And there are other duplicates. One thing that amused me also was the fact that here on our southeastern mounds of the period that I think were closest related to the Indus Valley cultures are very highly polished little disc, and sometimes thicker than disc, but polished stones that we have all called, the archaeologists have all called game stones. Exactly what kind of stones they played with these discs, which clearly are pretty much in graduated style, we have never known, and so far as I know, the surviving people themselves have never been able to come up with the precise game, but it must have been one of some kind. They are neatly arranged beside a balance scale, that came out of one of the buildings at Mohenjo-Daro are duplicates of these particular stones. They are units of weight used in a balance scale. So the culture of this kind needs to be studied even further. What I did, however, was to take here and proceed on the assumption that not only was the Yuchi culture very ancient and here in North America, but that it had relationships to the Indus Valley. Since then, we have also being able to show that it had close relationships to Old Kingdom Egypt as well. And this perhaps is most notable because of the fact that the first people among whom the Yuchi and the Zoya, the sky people, seem to have established their influence as priests and teachers and kings, were the Algonquin peoples, who spread all the way from Nova Scotia to the Gulf Coast of Louisiana, and who once, of course, gave way, generally, I believe, peacefully, to immigrants who came from various parts of the world. Perhaps the first may have been the Sioux, who may have come from Asia with groups of the Yuchis themselves. They've always been very closely associated, even though the languages are completely different. There were certainly the Muskogean people, who I will tell you in a minute a little more about as we break down the Shawano. And there were other groups, later people that we know were also Muskogean, but there were smaller tribes like the Kiowa and like the Illinois and the Miami and others who disappeared from the east, or eastern North America, so early that we're not even quite sure where they fitted. Most tragically of all were the Eries, about whom I will say something in a minute. What I want to say right now, though, is the fact that the Algonquins themselves have been shown to have used a language that was very closely related to Old Kingdom Egypt, the Egyptian language. On the shelf here near me is a complete set of the Epigraphic Society occasional publications, popularly called ISAC, the publication of the Epigraphic Society, of whom Dr. Barry Fell was the president and longtime guiding editor and director and scholar. He has shown in detailed study several things about the Algonquins that I think are very much to point here. One is, to begin with, he found that the Micmac, who are the Algonquin people who live furthest to the northeast, had a syllabary, a writing system, where one symbol represents a syllable rather than simply a phoneme as it does in our alphabet. That this was supposedly developed by a priest in the 17th century and taught to the Micmacs. But upon close examination of the old manuscripts containing this writing, Dr. Fell has shown very clearly that these are the hiatic characters from Egypt, the later priest writing, or the popular version of it. I think jumping off from there, he began studying several of the languages, and he discovered, of course, that Micmac does have a relationship to the Egyptian. He discovered also that the Cree and others to the northwest do as well, and that the Cree also had an alphabet or a syllabary based on these same ancient characters. One of the last works that he did was to examine certain of the small tribes who survived in Louisiana and I guess some in Mississippi, on the very low part of the Mississippi River, the Tunicas and others. And there, again, he found this high percentage of Egyptian words, letters. To me, this satisfies almost any requirement of saying that there is, of course, strong Egyptian influence. Now, as I do talk about the Shawano, against that background, I'm going to use some other terms and words that I think will carry some of the same significance. Now, Chief Brown says on his tape that the Shawano, who were also called the Shawanogi, which was not a Yuchi word, divided into 4 principal parts. The reason he said Shawanogi was not a Yuchi word was the simple fact that the gi on the ending of it is an ancient word from another language that does mean earth, and the Yuchis did use it, but they simply said the Shawanogi. Sha being the sky people, as we've said already, the earth and sky combination, rather, the plumed serpent. Wano in Yuchi is the word that means people. But interestingly enough, in the Yuchi language, it means people other than the Yuchis themselves. These were the people allied with the Yuchis. And it would have applied to the Algonquins as well as these other people that I had mentioned. Now he said these 4 divisions were the Ispagogi, the Kispagogi, the Isti-Muskogogi, and the Muscovy. The first one that he uses is Ispagogi. Now, interestingly enough, Is means man. And I believe that various people will agree with me, this has a certain Semitic ring about it. Po is a Yuchi word meaning under, as dominated by or ruled by. Ko is the Yuchi word for man. It's also the word for the man spirit, the a part of the great spirit. Ispagogi. Gi again is earth. So we've got here the earth people in the form of man. The name Ispagogi then applies specifically to the priest caste here in the south. The people that the Tukabashis said came in a boat from the sky and brought teachings to them, everything from a moral system that sounds similar to the 10 Commandments to how to do proper agriculture, and particularly the growing of maize or corn, and the ceremonies attending either the harvesting of the beans or the green corn. Now the second one that he says is Kispagogi. And we recognize the last part of this as po again, go, ki. But the first part is kiss. Well, kiss is a Shawnee word meaning eagle. So these are, again, these are the eagle people, are part of the Shah combination. See, I think if we knew enough, we would discover that all the ceremonial words have been told to have certain meanings, which they do, but underneath those are the actual breaking down syllable by syllable that people in the know could identify immediately who the people involved were. Then we come to the Isti-Muskogogis, which is the formal name of the Creeks, for lack of a better term, the Creek Confederacy. And it was a cosmopolitan group as well. But the Isti is man, Mus is serpent. So this is the man-serpent combination ceremonially. And serpent is not exactly the serpent that we have in our own mythology or our own religion. serpent is the bringer of knowledge as well, and the possessor of knowledge and of certain powers. So this is the combination again of the serpent and the eagle. The fourth one is Muscovy, and the only place I have been able to find the Muscovies is in the Crimea and in the Central Asia and the steppes of southern Russia, from which, of course, the modern term Muscovy comes. And this would be a completely absurd assumption that these might be the people involved, except for the fact that we now know very well that the Yuchis were very prominently involved in all parts of Asia. And in another connection in a few minutes, I'm going to tell you about a book that Isaac has published 3 years ago that identifies these Yuchis and the parts of them who came to North America in a completely different direction. So those are the four breakdowns of the Shawano. Now, we then have the Ispagogis, who were here certainly in the southeast and in the Ohio Valley, the ancestors directly of Chief Brown, and the ancestors ceremonially, of course, they were among them the Sun Kings. There were the Kispagogis, the people of the eagle. Now, there's a difference here as well. The Ispagogis, I happen to know their sacred bird was the falcon, just as is the case of Horus and the ancient Egyptians. The Muscovy people, their bird is the eagle, as it says here very plainly. And this reminds us again of certain later Semitic peoples and others, even the Romans, to whom the eagle itself was so important. The breakdown of Istimuscogogi is again man, serpent man. Then Muscovy is serpent man again, but the V and exactly who these people were, I don't answer for you in here. Somebody probably will know one day. All right, now in the 17th century, in the 1640s, certain of the French Jesuits began exploring down from Canada into what is now the Ohio, around the south part of the lakes and the Ohio Valley and the upper Mississippi. And they did send back copious reports, of course, first to Canada and then they wound up in France. Many of these were translated and published in the Jesuit Relations in the late 1890s and 1900 by a man named Gilmore Shea. And in here he describes the great people and territory that he calls the Shawano, spelled in French, of course, but the same name, the Shawano. And at that time, he says their empire, their power, their influence, they control people from the lakes to the Savannah River to the Gulf of Mexico. But at about that time, traders, the Iroquois, specifically the Senecas, who were trading deer skins and other skins to the Dutch and Swedes on the Hudson River, began invading with firearms, which the Shawano did not have. And within a period of a very few years, they had decimated large towns, cities in fact, around these great earthworks that still exist along the Ohio River and in the Mississippi and then certain other areas and certain other towns. One French writer, actually suggests that perhaps as many as 2 million people were killed by the Iroquois with their Dutch and firearms. The area were almost completely exterminated. Most of the other tribes were weakened. Most of them left the area of the Ohio Valley particularly. the Shawnee finally came back to the area of Chillicothe, which was one of the old cities. But until the 19th century, none of these people, or no Indians, lived really in Kentucky and what is now most of Tennessee, or Middle Tennessee. This was called the Dark and Bloody Land, for the simple reason that that's what it was. And there were stories that entire islands of bones had collected on the Ohio, in certain places on the Ohio River where these people were slaughtered. But the people we are most interested in at the moment were the Ispagogis and Kispagogis and Muskogogis, all of whom came among their kindred people here in the deeper southeast, following that certainly is following the 1660s, when the last of these cities areas were destroyed. And the group that we know best as the Yuchis came into the southeast with them at that time. But there were large towns of Yuchis here already. And starting with this Shawano, this period, that I do the tracing of the North American Sun Kings. The ones that I'm able to take by name begin actually with a man, a very remarkable individual that we know in history as Emperor Brim. He was the ruler according to the South Carolina records, the Spanish records in Florida, and the French records from their in penetration up from the Louisiana colony when they, and it seems that from about sometime in the 1690s until 1727, when this remarkable man died, he was able to stand back and balance and shoo off, for lack of a better term, turning the various Europeans against each other and playing them against each other. He managed to keep his territory intact here in the southeast, and was not highly popular with any of them, but very much respected. Chief Brown was a direct descendant, as I interpret what records there are, of the Emperor Brim. And he was also the descendant of another rather important southeastern figure in history, and this was a person named Timothy Barnard, who just a little later than the time of Emperor Brim came into the southeast. He was a Scotsman who ancestors were from Scotland, but who were more immediately associated with London. And his grandfather, I believe, was a famous mayor of London. Anyhow, early on, Barnard went among the people in what is now central Georgia to establish himself as a trader, dealing in skins and, of course, selling them in turn cloths and manufactured things and firearms and others. But he married a Yuchi woman, and this Yuchi woman turns out to have been very important. She was the Queen of Coweta, which was the city and the division with which the kings were, Emperor Brim himself was part. So it's much too complicated a matter to try to follow through right now, but that is what the Sun Kings deals with to a great extent. And this information, of course, came from oral tradition. It came from a large supply of the Brown family papers that are now in the in the Oklahoma Historical Society, beside the Capitol in Oklahoma City, and from documents here in the Southeast and our own colonial records otherwise, plus what I was told traditionally by Chief Brown and by other of the Yuchis. So it's a very interesting history, and it also shows really how cosmopolitan a people these southeastern people actually were. And because not only was Chief Brown descended from Timothy Barnard, I'm going to let out a secret and tell a little story with the permission of the lady who provided me with the information. Chief Brown's older daughter is Mrs. Juanita Brown Tiger, who lives now in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and has visited us here on occasions. Ms. Tiger is now, I believe, 88 years old, and she has fallen recently and broken her hip. So this is sort of to express my hope that she'll soon be up and about again. Anyway, she was very interested, of course, in the history of the Yuchis and in her father and her grandfather. I don't think I've explained actually how this hereditary line worked. I've hinted that it comes through the mothers ordinarily, which it does, and a man who serves as emperor, when he dies, the title goes to his sister's oldest son, if such is available and apparently agreed to by consensus. If not, they find another suitable person. But at the time of the forced removal from here in the 1830s, a Yuchi king named Tisoso, which means flint, was accused of leading the hostiles here in the southeast and of murdering certain families, his group, and 12 of them were hanged over in what is now Phoenix City, Alabama. This, some people may have hoped this put an end to the king line. Whether or not, this man's sister had made her way to Oklahoma a little earlier, and she became the mother of S.W. Brown Sr. Another brother was recognized as the king in Oklahoma. His name was Fushudgy Miko, which is one of the titles, as I've already said, that was handed down. He died during the Civil War, whether the results of one of the raids or not, I'm not sure. But I do know that Chief Brown's mother was killed by the Quantrell raiders. And this was one reason why her son, whose name was Samuel Brown, took a group of the Yuchis and went and joined the Union Army. Was, of course, not so much against the Confederacy as against the raiders there in Oklahoma. At the end of the war, the Yuchis organized their council again and elected this S.W. Brown as chief, hereditary chief, which he had a complete right to through his mother. And he served from 1866 till 1916, when he called the council together and had a discussion with them to the effect that he had been chief now for 50 years and was too old to continue trying to represent them and all of this. This is an eyewitness account by some people who were actually present as a small child sitting in the corner listening to this particular discussion. And they all protested, of course, as they were supposed to do, politely. Then they all asked, well, now, who can we get if the chief, who's eligible? And they ran down this line and this one, and nobody seemed to be particularly, just nobody really eligible. Then they said, well, Chief Brown said, well, I will present my son, Samuel W. Brown, Jr. And they all thought about Billy for a while and decided, yes, he was absolutely perfect. The point was he had been reared, as I reconstructed it, from childhood almost to take this position, but they agreed to it. But they didn't tell Billy, according to the account I heard from him himself. They had a meeting on the square ground, and Chief Brown said he wanted them all there. He went, and at that time his father took him by the hand and handed him the buckskin jacket that was in the very ancient Yuchi style, and they had used, and set him down in the chief seat and told him he was it. And that was really the sort of transfer of a title that occurred. But Chief Brown Sr. lived 20 years after that and died at the age of 102 in 1935, I guess. He didn't quite make 20 years in retirement. But these were two very powerful men in Oklahoma who certainly had a determination to preserve and carry on Yuchi culture and the culture of the southeastern people generally. And of course, this is basically the story that we're telling here. But the little bit of gossip I was going to tell you that I'm telling with the permission of Ms. Tiger because I published it with her permission. Her grandfather had told her, Ms. Tiger, she's 88 years old now, as you know, was grown, knew her grandfather well before he died. He had told her that his father was Sam Houston, a well-known historic figure, and that Sam Houston lived with them there in Arkansas long enough that he remembered riding with him on the horse a good deal about him. And he abandoned him and went off to Texas and never came back, so that was the end of Sam Houston. But the important thing is who your mother is in, of course, this situation. Mrs. Tiger said she asked her father on numerous occasions whether this was true, and her father would say, "We don't discuss this. This is not being talked about." Honey, wouldn't tell her anymore. Long after he died, she had done the thing that a lot of us do. She ran the genealogy down as much as she could everywhere. And she said, well, now, if he only had had a birth certificate, this would answer the problem. She said, well, he didn't have a birth certificate, but he certainly had a death certificate. So she went to whatever is the Bureau of Statistical Records, the battle records in Oklahoma. And here's what she found. The entry for Samuel W. Brown, Sr., born 1833, June or something, died 1935, occupation chief of the Yuchis, who his mother was and things, and father, General Samuel Houston, and source of information, Samuel W. Brown, Jr. And Mrs. Tiger has laughed, and I've been amused myself at Chief Brown standing there sort of biting his lips and deciding that really he had to tell the truth on his father's death certificate. So taking that as what I think is good, sound record, we now say that Chief Samuel Brown Sr.'s father was General Sam Houston. So there are many interesting things that turn up when you really search history. And there's much more in the way of Indian history to be searched. And of course, that's the purpose of this organization that I'm representing today. I was president of it for a while, and back several years, and maybe too long. We have a new president, but now I am the director of research for the Institute for the Study of American Cultures. And we do have some rather astonishing things that I hope will come out and throw a great deal more light on the relationship of peoples in the Southeast and of our peoples generally in North America with civilizations throughout the world. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Mahan, it certainly has been a pleasure hearing this fascinating history on the early American citizens, let's say. Okay. And I wonder if there might be other sources, books, or something you might recommend that people might study. And I understand that ISAC also is a publisher.
Oh, yes, we have our press. And there are various books I might recommend. I have several of them on the shelves here. But it's 3 books in particular that ISAC has published with the ISAC Press that I want to tell you about and your audience, because I'm not the only one who's been writing, and there are a history of other American peoples than just the ones in the eastern North America that I have been dealing with. One of our most significant books is this one, called The Dani and Nadani Indian Migrations, 1233 A.D., Escape from Genghis Khan, by Ethel G. Stewart of Ottawa. Miss Stewart is a Canadian lady, anthropologist, who years ago went from Queen's College to out in British Columbia to work with the Dani people, some of the Athabascan-speaking tribes. And this was in the early 50s. And she became acquainted with certain ancient stories that they told, that their people came in apparently rather recent times from a great land to the west, they came in ships, and they came by way of certain islands, and from there into the mainland. And she found that a French priest, who had been a missionary among them in the mid-19th century, had written down these stories, but in much greater detail and much more use of names and figures of speech, which is very rich in that language, and of course in most of the American languages. You often call things by a symbolic name rather than actual. And she became convinced that these were descended from people who had come from Asia. So she went to the libraries that were available to her in Canada and in Britain and in Turkey. It was not possible to get into Central Asia at the time she was doing this work. And she has shown, to make a long story short, after much, much work, that the people under discussion are the Yuchis of Central Asia that I had found and discussed in the secret, that they were also the Kushana, who are people also that I had encountered that I take to be ancestral of the Tuckabashis and others here in North America. And that these people had a large empire or kingdom and big cities that were decimated by Genghis Khan and his hordes, and that certain of the Apache, or warriors, and others made their way to the North China shore, the Armor ports, where Vladivostok was in later times, and there acquired boats and some wives from the native population, and went by way of the Aleutian Islands to the beaver seal hunting. Otter, I guess, was their main trade, fur, that these Chinese people had been doing, and from on into Alaska and British Columbia, and that from them a good portion of our Athabascan people descended. Interestingly enough, that these tribes are located all the way from northern Mexico to Alaska, among other peoples in many cases. But in our country, we have the Apaches and the Navajo, who are Athabascan-speaking people. And I've already used the name Apache, which is one of the names that she located. I've already used Yuchi and Kushana. So she makes a very strong case that most of these people came not by way of the Bering Straits, not on any ice cap, but that they came in boats in the year 1233 A.D. from Central Asia, where they had extremely good connections and much ancient history ahead of them. Miss Stewart has been to several of our research conferences. She was here last fall, and the leading Athabascan expert in the country, a young doctor, excuse me, I don't have his name at the moment, from St. Lawrence University, came and discussed these with her and told her he had learned a great deal more, but he didn't argue with her. And there have been some more developments, but this book is not easy to read, as you can see. I mean, it's easy to read, but there's just a lot of it. But she's complete with maps and vocabularies, and she proves her point quite well.
Interesting. Excellent. Interesting.
This one is called The Nexus. Spoken language, the link between the Maya and Semitic during pre-Columbian times. This is by David Allen Deal, who is a popular writer and an artist and a Hebrew scholar, just as you yourself are. And he has taken the Popol Vuh, Populvuh, as you know, is generally spelled, which is the history of the community, literally. But it's the Mayan traditional history, written down in the 16th century in Spanish letters by a Spaniard who was a native priest, apparently, because most of their manuscripts and documents and all had been burned by Bishop Landa in his big book burning escapade in the 1530s. Anyway, this multi-page history of the Maya, their traditional history, was just unknown till the mid-18th century, when a Spanish priest found it in one of the churches there and translated the Mayan, in which it was written, into Spanish. Then in the 1930s, 47, I guess, there was a new edition of the Popol Vuh done in Spanish, but translated in English at that time. And this was the first time various people, including me, had ever heard of the Popol Vuh. Dr. Cyrus Gordon and others said it had a remarkable sound about it, like the Old Testament, and that there clearly must be some Semitic connections there from the Old World. But as you know, this has been a most unpopular subject among scholars, and it didn't get anywhere particularly. I myself read some things that I thought sounded like the Old Testament, and I was inclined, as I have been for a very long time, to believe that these people actually came in boats, came across. In all of the discussion, nobody thought about the simple matter that you could take the Spanish letters, and they are not like present days, their sounds are not, but there are scholars who know pretty much exactly what the letters, the phonetic renderings were at that time, and simply read them aloud and see what they say. He began doing this and discovered that this was a language very close to Hebrew.
Well,
So close, in fact, that he's in various places in there, he has taken sections of it and rendered the Mayan back into Hebrew letters, and it reads very well. Now, as we were publishing this, I wanted a proofreader. Mr. Deal said rather than send it back to him, and it's hard sometimes to proof your own copy, he wanted me to find a good Hebrew scholar to read the Hebrew and check and be sure he got the letters right and all this. Well, I explained this to a certain rabbi friend of mine, who is a very good scholar. But in the months that went on while we were getting this thing together and all, he moved somewhere. And he said, just send the manuscript on to him, and he would do the checking for me, which I did. He called me a day or two later and said, does that man know any Hebrew? And I said, well, yes, he's supposed to be very good. He said, well, I hate to tell you, but this is the worst Hebrew I have ever seen. I said, well, what do you mean with that? Then he explained to me that the syntax was wrong, the endings were wrong. I said, you know you've been reading Mayan, don't you? It had not occurred to him that what he was doing actually was reading Mayan, the Quiche Mayan, in fact, written in Hebrew letters.
Wow.
So he began laughing at that part and said, well, he's got it then.
Wow.
So this book I highly recommend, but among other things, it tells about the crossing of the Red Sea by Moses, who I think he presents a good case is actually Quetzalcoatl. No, Kukulkan, I'm sorry, both of them, my traditional white leader who taught that these people came in boats, and they came sometime after the time of Joshua. And there's just a lot of repetition. And I think you yourself will enjoy reading this one.
Very good. Very good.
Now, this one I believe you know already.
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
All right, Dr. Murray helped, shall I say, materially, and I believe you are actually selling some of them
Yes.
in the publication of this book, which I wrote an introduction to it, and I said, anyone who reads this book can never again believe that Columbus or even Leif Erikson discovered America. Evidence presented that old world people were here centuries before them is in the form of translated writing on stone and related petroglyphs, which the author has carefully recorded for the past 45 years, and they extend all the way from Colorado to New Mexico, to parts of New Mexico, and of course all across Oklahoma, the Cimarron River and the
Arkansas.
Arkansas River and Arkansas itself, and then she picked up a few over here in the east from time to time. And these, as I've said, are from cave walls, cliff sides, individual boulders, just periodic writings that came from here and there, and are obviously written by a great many people. But again, in most cases, they clearly are in known Old World alphabets. There are a few that are not. They, just as you would expect, make ordinary notations, but they also have religious significance and religious meanings. And this is, I think, the most important single one book that certainly ISAC has published. And I do thank you on this occasion for your help with doing it, and of course Ms. Gloria Farley, who is well known, I suspect, to your audience.
Yes.
Already.
It's a great work, and we appreciate you and your efforts also. And I'd like to ask a question, if I may. If someone wanted to learn more about early American culture, and I'm talking about from history, from the time of the beginning of history, how would they join?
Well, Art, it's a very simple matter. They simply write us or call us and say they'd like to join, and we will send them a little form that records their name and gives them the rate of, I guess, 5 different categories of membership. The general membership is $30 a year. The research membership is $65, and I'll explain that there are certain, shall we say, perks appended to the that membership. There are corporate memberships and a sponsor membership, which are people who feel they would like to really help us in this research. So we will send you that. The address, of course, is ISAC, or the Institute for the Study of American Cultures. The address is Post Office Box 1658, Columbus, Georgia, 31902. That is also the address of the press. And we have published works also by Paul Chapman, a new biography of Columbus that I think is extraordinarily important, and 3 things at least by Cyclone Covey, because we have suddenly realized that we need to know a lot more about the archaeology and history of the Middle East and Greece and all than we have previously. So I have a big fat book over here by Cyclone Covey. There's that. Anyhow, we do have a catalog, which we'll be happy to send you also on any of these. Now, anybody who wants additional information beyond that, we are now our research center is now functioning. We make, if you come here and use them, we make our books available to you. We try to give you a comfortable place to work. We have a most remarkable set of tapes recording information on every phase of research into contacts between ancient America and the old world in our annual research conferences that have been recorded by your own crews since 1988. And this is something more than 100 individual papers. They are now available. You can come here and play them on our player and listen to them or see them on our videos, or we make copies of them for you.
Well, it's certainly fascinating when our young people have an opportunity, and I don't want to make that sound as though your organization is limited to young people. They're young at heart in studying history, and
well, that has been one of the things that I think I have been most pleased by, is the fact that our members do not particularly seem to be in any particular age group.
Very true, very true.
And we have made a particular point of trying to appeal to people generally with knowledge rather than in one particular discipline. We are delighted to have an archaeologist. I'm a historian, I believe myself. We have historians, but we have people who are artists and who are engineers, certainly, and all of these have done serious work in this particular field, linguists and others. So.
And your work in my estimation, is excellent.
Well, thank you very much.
for
Thank-
having us again. I want to say a special word to you. I promised the American Indian that we were going to show them the author of Sun Kings, the history of our people as they have migrated, who they were, the dignity, the respect that is due. I think that this is a work that would be of great help and aid in knowing your roots. They're very important. It is our intent that the respect and dignity of all people be held forward, that we can appreciate each other as fellow citizens of this planet we call Earth. The history is his story, and certainly Dr. Mahan has done an excellent job in both The Secret and The Sun Kings. I could not give it a higher recommendation to the early American citizens that Columbus found living here, along with the many people that had come in contact with him, the wisdom, the knowledge that was passed on from generation to generation is a fascinating study. I know you're going to enjoy it. I hope you have enjoyed this as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. So, Dr. Mahan, again, until we meet again, thank you for having us.
Best wishes to you and your audience.
Thank you.